Looked at each other and said, I've got something to tell you. And they had the exact same story. The fact that they saw the same apparition on the same day is extremely rare. And the interesting thing was the fact that they had the amount of detail of this person. They thought, we're going to go back through the records and try and ID this person. So they go back through the records and they're looking, and suddenly they find a photo, and this photo matches exactly what they had seen. And it was this man here. His name is John Balaban. He moved to Adelaide from Romania. He was an industrial chemist. So in the community, he was known as a very intelligent, educated person. But he had another side which they didn't know about. He had a wife and a small boy, and him and his wife separated for a while. While they were separated, he actually went out one night, got very drunk, and met a woman at the pub, and he went home with her. When they went back to her house, she suddenly demanded money from him, so obviously realising she was the lady of the night. In a fit of rage, he beats this woman to death. The police questioned him. They did suspect it was him, but they didn't have enough evidence, and so he got away with it. Then him and his wife reunited, and so he moved back in with his wife, and they were actually living above a cafe in Guja Street. Now, they lived up there also with one of the workers from the cafe, one of the waitresses, so they rented an apartment up there. So anyway, one night again, he goes out, he goes to the pub, he gets really, really drunk, and he's stumbling along the River Torrens, and he finds an iron bar. With the iron bar, he bashes 3 people's heads in. So he's bashed 3 innocent people's heads in. One guy so badly he had severe fractures on his skull. Then he goes home. Obviously he's covered in dirt and blood, and his wife questions him and says, "What happened to you?" In a fit of rage, he kills his wife. The wife's mother, his mother-in-law, was visiting. He kills her too. He beats the little boy. The little boy dies 5 days later in hospital. And the waitress that lived there, she survived by jumping out of the second floor window. I think she broke her arm, but she was okay. So obviously now they had a lot of evidence. They had a witness. So he was pretty quickly found guilty. So he was brought here. All through his stay here, up until his execution, he said that they deserved to die. He had no remorse. And he actually also confessed to killing a prostitute in France. So we don't know how many other people he did kill. After that, I think she was about 8, a man raped her in her bed, and he left her with permanent injuries that meant she could not have children, and she was addicted to painkillers for the rest of her life. When she was 15, her father died. So at 18, having no family left in Ballarat, she decided to come back to Adelaide to find her mum. And she found her mum living in Moonta, so she moves to Moonta. While there, she becomes housekeeper to a man called Thomas Woolcock, and he was a widow with a son. Back in those days, obviously, it was frowned upon for this widow man to be living with a single woman. So they got married to stop the town gossip, but it wasn't a marriage of love. He was very mean to her. He was an alcoholic. He beat her. Quite a few times she did run away, and he would hunt her down and bring her back. Ironically, she did try to commit suicide by hanging, but the beam broke, and so she survived. So anyway, Thomas actually started becoming very ill, and he passed away. And they put it down to mercury poisoning. In those days, when you worked in the mines, you were exposed to mercury. And also, after the chemists, they used to sell mercury for head lice. And she was buying it to treat the son's head lice. But anyway, when you're a woman, you didn't get a fair trial. There were no lawyers. They knew that she'd bought mercury from the chemist, and they knew that she had these problems with her husband. So very quickly, they found her guilty. They sentenced her to execution on December 25. But then they thought, well, that's a little bit mean, Christmas Day. They pushed it forward to December 30. You'll notice the mannequin here, she's dressed in white. She was executed in her wedding dress. That was her request. So that's the story of Elizabeth. It's a very sad one. I said we don't open that one during night tours because it is dangerous. There are holes and things everywhere. And he noticed that the door was open there when it should have been shut. So I'm doing my tour and he goes off to shut that door. And as he's shutting that door, from inside that building there's a massive bang, as if someone slammed one of the doors inside shut. But the thing is if you go in there, there are no doors in there. There's door frames, but all the doors have been removed. Also, over here, the toilet block here, this is known as the haunted toilet block. One day, one of our volunteers was walking through, and he actually heard the sound of someone urinating in there. And as you can see, obviously, it's a display, so he's quite annoyed, thinking, you know, I'm going to go up and pull them off. But then as he's getting closer, he's looking, and you can see under the door, there's no feet there, there's nobody in there. Why a ghost would make that sound, I'm not sure, but that's what he heard. Also, another night, there were two volunteers, and they were walking through here, coming out of the activity room here. And at the same time, they looked at each other and said, did you hear that? And they said, yeah, I did. But the thing is when they told each other what they heard, it was completely different. One girl heard it sounded like, she said, like someone was banging on the top of a paint tin lid. And the other girl heard what sounded like two men having a conversation. Two completely different sounds, and yet they heard it at the same time. When he's walking down here, and he said as he got in front of the laundry area, he felt a stinging as if someone had pushed something against his cheek, like a stinging, burning sensation. He didn't think much of it. He thought it was just a bug or something's bitten me. But when he goes back to the group, they all look at him and said, what happened to you? And then he looks in the mirror and he's got a massive red welt, like a blister on his face. He's been burnt on his face. And he's still got this scar to this day. And he's still a skeptic, which just freaks me out, because if something like that was happening to me, I'd be getting out of here. But that's one of our not so nice stories of things that have happened here. Also, as I mentioned, this big building here, the top floor there was the dormitory, and that's where a lot of the other workers used to sleep as well, because it just made sense to have them on site. Once the jail closed, that's the area where the dorms were for the school sleepovers. So one evening, it was early evening, there was a little girl and she wanted to grab some lollies or something in the shop area. So she walked down to that door at the top there where the staircase is and walks down the staircase. As she's walking down the alley to the shop, on the left-hand side there's a doorway. Out of the doorway walks a man, and she said he's quite a big man, he's walking towards her and she thinks, okay, he works here. But he starts walking closer and closer to her, and as he gets really close, he opens out his arms as if he's going to give